The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Most people that I know, most American people, will have read it in high school for a school project in American literature. I'll tell you what my relationship with Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn's is. My relationship started, I'm going to tell you exactly when, 1984. 30 years ago, my mom and I were sitting downstairs. We lived at this beautiful condo, and I say beautiful because it was simple, but it had, still has, lots of space. Her apartment is gigantic. She still lives there now. And downstairs back in the 80s, it was still safe enough for you to just sit outside. And we used to sit outside and talk to the other neighbors while the kids played. And it was these two little boys, and I'll tell you what they physically look like, and then I'll explain why. Two little boys, and they were brothers. I thought they might have been twins at first. They were very light skinned, almost white, but they're black boys in the sense that they have the hair, the facial features. Both their parents are black, but they're just light skinned. And I remember, this is so surreal to be remembering this now. I remember saying to them, "It's so nice to have black friends," because in my entire neighborhood there was nobody else that was the same color as me. It was a posh neighborhood that I grew up in. And the pyramid, the social pyramid in Brazil, was at that point in a way that very few black people had the position that we had, the status in society. And I'm not saying this to brag, I'm saying this because I am proud that my parents gave me the education and the freedom. And I remember they said to me, "But we're not black, we're white. Look at our skin. You're black, we're not." They're just talking about the color of their skin. And I've always had a perception that being black was something I was proud of because my parents never made me be ashamed of it. And I looked at their facial features and at their parents, and they didn't like it that I said that. But we continued to play, and their mother was talking to my mother, and she's saying, "Oh, you're so lucky to have this beautiful little girl. I have two boys. I always wanted to have a girl." And she sort of like adopted me as a daughter as well. And my mom and her became very close friends, and they used to talk every day. And I just had this, I admired her a lot. She had this short hair and this beautiful face, and she wore big earrings. And my mom, at a certain point, had short hair and worn the big earrings. So she could have been my mom's sister almost. So it was a beautiful friendship. And she moved away from that building next door after a while, and we missed her terribly. But we stayed friends. She made some of the candy for my wedding in 1999. Her name is Mara, and her two boys, Vito and Junior. They were from my childhood probably the only little boys that I played with outside in my building. There were mostly girls in my building. And she used to say, "Oh, the boys don't really like to read." "You like to read, Pollyanna?" she would say to me, "You like to read, Polyana? That's so cute that you like to read so much." And I said, "You know what? There's some books here." And and then she presented me with this book. Not this book that I'm holding right now. Not this particular copy. This one, I either bought it or my father bought it for me in the 90s at some point in the United States. She gave me a copy of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but it was in Portuguese. So my first contact with Mark Twain was a translation from English to Portuguese, and I read it, and I remember the connection I had with the book and how I perceived it at the age of 12. Later on, when I was in college, I went to the university in Brazil to become an English teacher. To become an English teacher in Brazil, you have to go to college for 4 years. You have to study American literature, British literature, American studies, British studies. You have to study for 4 years pronunciation, writing. You have to be very good at listening, and you have to have very good reading comprehension. And not only that, you have to study didactics. You have to study teaching in all its capacities. Teaching children, teaching adults, teaching in the school system of Brazil. You get an entire syllabus of teaching practice topics and courses that relate to the school system itself. Translation, philosophy, sociology, psychology. You take 3 semesters of psychology. So it's a very rich course in reading and in teaching, really. When I took this course in the section of American literature, I was presented with this book again. And a very close friend of mine in college was called Geraldo. He is in, I believe he's in one of my Facebooks. And he and I did a project on this. And at the age of 22, 21, 22, I found a different perspective here. Our paper that we wrote together was about the homosexual relationship, or the undertones of homosexuality between the slave and the little boy. I remember thinking at the time, I had never thought of it this way, but I believe the internet was not what it is today. So this was not a paper that I did based on finding things on the internet. This was a paper that I did reading different anthologies, reading different reviews of the book, and talking to people, talking to teachers, talking to professors, and finding different opinions. Nowadays, you Google something, boom, there it is. But it wasn't like this back then. So I'm gonna start reading it again, and I believe that good literature means quality. Quality. Not a bestseller. Not a book that everybody's reading just because it's popular. Good literature has something to do with the quality of the writing. And I'm not going to sit here and bow down to society telling me, oh, you gotta read Harry Potter and you gotta read Lord of the Rings and 50 Shades of Grey. I am sorry, I'm not gonna read that. I understand that there is, of course, the value in certain types of literature. Any reading is better than no reading at all. I learned this. a long time ago. So I'm glad that kids are reading these days. And if they're reading Harry Potter, so be it. More power to them. But I still prefer the literature that's classic. That is, to me, that is good literature. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain. Let's talk a little bit about Mark Twain. His real name was not Mark Twain. A lot of people don't know that. That was a pseudonym that he used. And I'm going to write this down. Let me write this down here. A pseudonym, it's not like a different login that people use in nasty websites. It is not using a fake name to get anywhere. There's nothing illegal, it's nothing wrong. A pseudonym is merely a different identity created by an author to write freely without having that writing associated to his own name. And a lot of writers, they will have that pseudonym that they will write under, and they will have a completely different characteristic that they bring into that pseudonyms. The body of work that they create under a pseudonym will be completely different from the body of work that they have under their own name. And that's what a pseudonym is. And writing under a pseudonym is something that a lot of authors do for different reasons. And perhaps I can make a separate video just talking about why Mark Twain wrote under a pseudonym. I'm going to find on enotes.com one of my favorite websites for literature study guides, and I'll also include the name of it on this video, so if people are looking at it, and I hope people are watching these videos, if they are, then they will also learn something. enotes.com. I'm gonna look for a good biography on it is not always easy to find everything that you want on here on the internet just by doing a wild search. But if you go to a study center like this, you'll find what you need, and this is what I'm doing right now. I'm looking for a good biography. Mark Twain. Mark Twain. Mark Twain himself was Twain's first successful work of fiction. Born in 1835 as Samuel Langhorne Clemens, Twain worked as a riverboat captain on the Mississippi while a young man. When the pilots called out the depth of the river, Mark Twain meant that the river was 2 fathoms deep. A master of vernacular English, Twain eventually traveled all over America and beyond, paying attention to how people really spoke and what really entertained them. He published poetry, jokes, tall tales, nonfiction, and of course, some of the greatest novels in American history. His characters Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn seem to capture the meaning of boyhood, America, and life on the Mississippi River. So his real name was Samuel Clemens, but Mark Twain was his pseudonym. I would like to make this video a video that people will sit and watch and I understand that it's been a few minutes already. So chances are, there's been 15 minutes already. So I'm not going to make it too long. But if you're a fan of my work as a teacher and the things that I have to say, maybe we'll sit. Maybe we'll sit and listen. I don't know. I used to be quite popular as a teacher when I was quite young teaching. I started teaching. I was one of the youngest teachers in my state. I started student teaching at 17. And a lot of people used to say the reason why the students loved me so much was because I was so young and I was so close to their age. But I'm feeling now at the age of 42, I have a lot of students who do enjoy how I teach and the techniques that I use and how I speak with them and how I interact with them and how basically the techniques and approaches I use to teaching English language. So I believe that it really was not just about being young, was just trying to be the best teacher that I could be. And that's why some of my students really enjoyed my style. Of course, in the past 25 years as a teacher, I've had, I believe, 4 or 5 complaints. That's pretty good. It's like a complaint every 5 years, and 5 of those years when I wasn't working really as a teacher every day, going to a school or anything. I was just a substitute. My daughter was my student. She never complained. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Chapter 1. You don't know about me. Without you, have read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. But that ain't no matter. That book was made by Mr. Mark Twain, and he told the truth mainly. Now, at this very beginning, we can take a note. Take notes? Go ahead and take notes. Taking notes is essential. And this note, I'll tell you exactly what it is. What kind of narrative is this? The narrative is in first person. This is somebody telling the story, and they're in the story, and they're talking directly to the reader. Hi, I am such and such. I am telling you the story. That is first person. The narrative is in first person. What is the narrative? The narrative is how the story is told. And who is the narrator? The narrator is the person telling the story. So at the very beginning we know that the narrator of the story is telling the story. And we can also make another note about African American vernacular. That ain't no matter. That is part of African American vernacular, which is used in colloquialisms, in slang, a lot of hip hop, a lot of the new modern, I don't want to say trendy, but yes, I want to say trendy. A lot of people use ain't as in they want to feel cool that they're using the language that's spoken in the streets for that matter, and that's part of it. That ain't no matter. And you see, this was written a gazillion years ago, and they were already using it, so it's not a matter of being trendy. This was just the language that was spoken by the common people. Vernacular language. That is nothing I never seen anybody but lied. One time or another, without it, was Aunt Polly, or the widow, or maybe Mary. Aunt Polly, Tom's aunt, she is, and Mary, and the widow Douglas, is all told in that book, which is mostly a true book, with some strachers, as I said before. So I remember, that's the thing that I remember about being 12 years old and loving literature and loving reading and being so invested in this that I read Huckleberry Finn before I read Tom Sawyer. And when I read that there was another book, Tom Sawyer, Tom Sawyer's Adventures, I wanted to learn about Tom Sawyer. So I went to the library at the Binational Center where I went. This is something else that people might not know about me. I went to a binational center from the age of 8 or 9. I think I was enrolled when I was 8. And from that age up to when I was 16, before going to the States again, I went to this binational center. So let me talk about this. Tom, capital letter T. Okay, Tom Sawyer. Tom Sawyer. Let me put this in a video. This is going to look kind of neat, having the things written there with a little TV. Love it. Tom Sawyer is another character from another book, and Huckleberry Finn acknowledges this. So I remember going to the library at the Binational Center, and a Binational Center in the sense that it had not only languages. You could go there to learn Spanish, to learn Portuguese, to learn English, but mostly it was a cultural center for the United States of America, where the cultures of Brazil and the cultures of America were taught, and you could get a diploma in English after finishing the entire basic course, intermediate, and an advanced course. I did all of those courses parallel to going to school. So I learned how to speak English as a child. I spoke English to my dad a lot, and we lived in America when I was 6, and then as a teenager I went back to the United States to finish high school. And at this binational center there was a library, and from this library I got most of the knowledge in literature that I have today, because it's all the books that I read before I even went to college. So this is chapter 1. I'm probably going to make a separate video to read just the entire chapter. This became just a little bit of an introduction of what kind of videos I'll be making about this. And I'm going to wrap it up because it's been a little bit too long. It's early morning. It's 6:11 in the morning in Norway, of